What are some of the biggest shifts you've observed in water engineering careers, and how can engineers best navigate these changes throughout their own journeys?
Civil engineers are in high demand, right? I know that I've always wanted to just stay at one company and be a lifer, and be able to say to the new person, oh yeah, when I started here 30 years ago, things were X, Y, and Z. But I think there really is that shift of you only grow when you move, or people are afraid to be complacent, whether that's salary or just challenge-wise. And so
Water engineers don't just build infrastructure, they build their careers through constant adaptation. From shifting project delivery methods to changing technology and rising regulatory expectations, a career in water engineering can take many turns. And for some, the path isn't always linear. Today, we're joined by Rebecca Martinez, PE, project engineer at GFT, whose interdisciplinary and international journey has shaped the way she approaches water and wastewater projects. We'll be talking about how the engineering profession is evolving, how stakeholders and project delivery realities influence career growth, and how embracing new tools and diverse experiences can expand an engineer's opportunity. All through the lens of our own ebb and flow career story. If you're navigating your own path in the water sector or helping guide the next generation of engineers, this episode offers relatable insights, real lessons learned, and encouragement to grow wherever your journey takes you. Before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, an interactive experience where civil engineers can sharpen their project management and leadership skills through real-world sessions on AI and project management, earned value, and risk management. And here's the exciting part. At this event, we're also announcing the winners of the AEC PM Awards, recognizing professionals who lead with purpose and deliver measurable results. Just imagine someone from your firm being named AEC PM of the Year. That kind of recognition can boost your people, your culture, and your firm's reputation in a big way. The event will take place on June 10th, 2026 at the Forest Gate Country Club in New Jersey. You can register now at aecpmconnect.com. And if you want to nominate someone for the awards, head over to aecpmawards.com to download the nominations guide before the deadline on February 28th. I'm your host, James Taylor, and this is the Civil Engineering Podcast, the engineer's leading show for civil engineering professionals, ranked as the #1 civil engineering podcast by FeedSpot. It's now time for our civil engineering conversation of the week with Rebecca Martinez, PE project engineer at GFT. Rebecca, welcome to the Civil Engineering Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So to start out, Rebecca, can you share a little bit about your history, your journey as a water engineer, how it began, and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure thing. That's something I really like to talk about. I initially started off in my engineering career as a chemical engineer. I went to UPenn and I thought I really wanted to do pharmaceutical things, and I found out that I didn't. But I found out a little bit too late, I'd say. I was a junior and we didn't have civil engineering, and so I just kind of pushed through that. But in college, I figured out that I liked water, wastewater, international development. And so I tried to pursue those things in as many ways that I could that weren't my degree. So I ended up, starting my career at a pharmaceutical company as a project engineer. And in, retrospect, I learned a lot of the same skills that I needed in this industry, but it was just in a different one. And then I decided that I really needed to kind of make the big jump and get into water, because I think I would regret it if I didn't. So I got a master's at UNC, their public health school, and that kind of was the transition for me. And then I started my career as a project engineer in the, civil industry. So I've been with a bunch of different companies trying to find kind of the right fit of, private versus municipal work and all that kinds of stuff. But that's how I became water engineer, and I'm very glad I did.
And started in pharmaceutical. I mean, that's a big jump between the two. But like you said, you kind of saw some similarities between the two industries. Anything that in particular that you saw that, hey, this was the kind of setting the framework for where you wanted to be today?
I think a lot of it was, project implementation. So even though, my first job was kind of like making sure that, there wasn't cross contamination at an active, like, pharmaceutical plant, to build a new room to produce a new pharmaceutical product was the same steps as kind of, building a treatment plant or doing some kind of, water main work. You still have to deal with your contractors, you have to do your due diligence, you have to do all of your quality checks. So it really did lay the groundwork, and I didn't realize that till much later.
As regulations and safety considerations continue to change, how has your interdisciplinary background helped you adapt and stay effective across different project environments?
Mm, that's a good one. I think I think it's like a mindset shift, right? Like, if I didn't have a chemical background, when I heard really chemically things, I think I wouldn't even think about them. And now, with things like PFAS and emerging contaminants and disinfection
Mhm.
byproducts, my curiosity is piqued and I kind of like am able to switch into a mindset of like, what do I know on a chemical side? What do I know from like a smaller
Sure.
side? And how can I use that in the bigger picture? So like I'm not saying, I'm a chemist, that ship has
Right.
sailed. But I think getting to understand, like, why the media that we use in filters does X, Y, or Z, like, I think that is something that stays with me because of that background. So, all in all, I think it just helps me approach things, like, holistically.
I like that answer. It kind of has that framework. It's still, like you said, you're not a chemist, but you still understand the pieces associated with it that kind of can help you continue to grow in your career and the knowledge and assist on projects where you might not have been able to without that
Definitely,
background.
definitely.
So, how has evolving delivery methods, along with interagency coordination and stakeholder communication, influenced the type of roles you've taken on in water infrastructure projects and shaped your growth as a project engineer?
That's a loaded one. I think, as I said, I've worked at a few different firms, and some were purely municipal and some were, really small. Some right now I'm at GFT, and it's a nice mix of municipal, private, big clients, small clients, big plants, small plants, and within that, right, we are seeing, sometimes we're going after design build proposals, and sometimes it's true like municipal bread and butter, like lowest bidder wins. And I think
Mhm.
getting to do both makes me better at both. Uh, I think if I were only ever doing municipal, I think the mindset would be, this is what we have to do because you have to get the lowest bidder. And there's like I think
Right.
I like both, but I think when you get to do different delivery styles, you're able to like turn on different parts of your brain. And so you can be a bit more creative when you don't necessarily have to just do replace in kind, That's kind of always
Right.
been my thing is like, what if we challenged replace in kind a little bit at least and tried a little bit of an upgrade?
Well, and the piece that you're talking about realistically is that innovation aspect, right? Like, the replacing kind. Okay, we're taking a pipe and putting the exact same pipe back in. You know, hate to say it, but there's not a whole lot associated with that, and I think you kinda mentioned that as well. There's not a lot really of ingenuity or innovation associated with that, and so it's like, okay, well, what are some other things that we could do to be making a better system? How can we be taking that next step, to not just, like you said, replace in kind, but also infuse some of the other knowledge that you've learned from other projects into things?
And I think even too, it could be even if the technology hasn't changed, it could be like how you manage the project. And like sometimes I go into a lot of like male dominated spaces where like things have always been done a certain way. And I like to bring my spin. I like to bring my personality and my compassion and kind of
Yeah.
things into a project space. And I think in some ways that allows me to innovate personally, if that's a way, like, between person to
Mhm.
person, I'm able to kind of create the atmosphere that allows for a successful project, even if we're doing the same thing we did 50 years ago.
Leadership drives strong projects. Become an AEC PM professional and give your team the leadership skills they need to thrive. Customized PM development, premium content, and a leadership edge that sets you apart. Learn more at aecpm.com.
What are some of the biggest shifts you've observed in water engineering careers, and how can engineers best navigate these changes throughout their own journeys?
I think, civil engineers are in high demand, right? We
Mhm.
will never kind of be out of high demand. That's just kind of how the world works. And I think something that might be shifting is like, I know that I've always wanted to just like stay at one company and like be a lifer, and
Mhm.
be able to say to the new person like, "Oh yeah, when I started here 30 years ago, things were X, Y, and Z." But I think there really is that shift of you only grow when you move, or like people are afraid to be
Hmm.
complacent, um, whether that's salary or just like challenge wise. And so I think in terms of like the jobs themselves as, you know, commodities, even that people are looking to make changes more often. And I think when you want to stay somewhere, it's a little bit more against the grain.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's definitely been a change in culture of, over the past how many years you see less and less people that are, at companies for, even 5 to 10 years. You're seeing them move on, take that next step. You said something interesting, and I wanted to dive into that a little bit deeper. You mentioned that you felt like growth is the main driver. That whether that's growth in salary or growth in because of potential of complacency, where you kind of lose your passion. Can you talk a little bit about that and where you see that coming into play?
Yeah, I think this is something I've talked about a lot with my friends who aren't engineers, who maybe right out of college were project managers within like 3 years or something, say they're consultants or whatever. And I think within our industry, there is a deep value on experience. And sometimes
Hmm.
job titles and things are tied to that. And you can't rush it, you can't fake it, you can't, nothing substitutes for years done. And so I think often, say you were at a company for 5 years and you had the same position, you didn't get promoted, some people be frustrated and they might go search for
Yeah.
greener pastures. But I think something that's always been helpful to me to understand is that it's not about the title necessarily. It's about like how your role has evolved, how you've evolved. And like, again, like you have to earn your stripes, not in like a negative way, just like you're going to be a
Yeah.
better engineer if you take the time and learn how to do things right the first time, even if that means your LinkedIn profile doesn't look as good as your friends.
Yeah, it's interesting that when you start getting into that comparing of the people, whether in the industry or out of the industry, and seeing what they might be doing, you start to get that itch of, okay, well, what else can I do?
Mhm.
But realistically, each one of us has our own journey that's important, to capitalize on our strengths and what we can be doing versus looking around, and whether it's the old phrase, keeping up with the Joneses or whatever it might be of, hey, this person got this and this. It's really about our journey and what makes it your journey
Yeah.
realistically.
And like
And that's
owning
I
that
appreciate
too.
you sharing that because I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, owning it, and that's a great piece of it as well. Like, I think, I've seen some engineers where they're expecting things to come to them, and realistically, if you're not owning your own path, there's a chance that you are left behind. And it sounds like through your career, you've been able to make those adjustments to find your passion and where you want to be and see your growth.
Yeah, I think something I've always been really mindful of is just doing some self-reflection and seeing like, am I growing? Am I happy? What am I lacking? And that's probably what got me into the industry, right? Like I wasn't happy, I wasn't growing, and I was lacking the passion, right? And so as I have kind of answered that along my career, it's taken me lots of different places. It's taken me abroad. It's taken me into circles I never thought I'd be. And And I think those are just really guiding principles. They help me be a better me, which makes me a better engineer.
Yeah. We're talking to Rebecca Martinez and talking a little about water engineering. So Rebecca, as water programs become more complex, because you've talked about PFAS and other things that are happening right now that water engineers have to be considering. What lessons have you learned about managing schedule, cost, and risk? And can you share a recent project that illustrates those lessons and reflects the ebb and flow of your career?
Yeah, sure. I think that the complexity, it's not going away. Things are getting more and more complex, even if we have more tools to help address them. But something that I learned recently, I did an emerging leaders program at GFT, and we had to do a profile, like a personality profile, and it just made me think a lot about how do I have conversations with people in a way that they hear what I need them to hear,
Mm.
and knowing that we all have different personalities. I mean, this isn't groundbreaking, right? But it has helped frame so many of my conversations, knowing like sometimes I shy away from confrontation because I take a more laid back personal approach and I'm not maybe the most direct.
Sure.
And so I think somewhere that I've seen that in practice lately and just seen the complexity of a project be, let's say, lessened just by having good personal skills was for the client. We were doing a water main job and getting everyone on board to even get to the pre-con was just
Yeah.
like herding cats. It was, we just couldn't get it started. And
Sure.
instead of taking that kind of like a ding or, like a failure, I kind of thought back like, well, how can I reach out in a way that like everyone's hearing that there's urgency, the client needs this, you know, yesterday, but we understand the priorities of the contractor, the inspector, of the client. So kind of being able to meet them where they were in terms of, let's say, how they want to be communicated with. Like the contractor only did voicemail communication, it seemed. And,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
client wanted written, signed, dated mail. So yeah, I think just having a pulse on the complexities and how and adapting like my communication style made the whole project like go better. I know that's not a super technical answer, but I do find that a lot of my best engineering is, in the boardrooms before we get to the
Mm.
before we get to the street to put the vein in.
So how did you identify each grouping's communication style that they preferred, and how did you adjust to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was trial and error. It was a new client for me. So the little bit of that was kind of talking to our internal client manager and figuring out like how do they like to be managed? Do they like a really active, PM? Do they want to kind of be left out? Do they want to decide things? And so that was kind of like learning internally. And then in terms of like contractor, that was trial and error too, honestly, because I
Hmm.
just had to find a method that worked. How can I get these people to respond and value the project that they
Yeah.
bid on and won?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's knowing the people, right? You mentioned trial and error. You kind of had to figure out what each person, what makes them tick, how they communicate. When communication is a key part of just about every project that we work on, the success leads to either or the success is driven from the communication that took place. And so, you great point about the trial and error and really just trying to understand the people, because that's really where you see that success.
For sure.
Rebecca, looking ahead, how do you see GIS, modeling, digital tools transforming the water engineering practice and the skill sets engineers need?
I mean, I think you can already kind of see this in practice, and you see it too with like younger engineers who come into the field and they have all this great, I knew this program and this program, and I've spent 3 years drawing in Revit, they just bring this energy that, coupled with the new technological advances,
Mm.
just makes projects go smoother. I think when we view like technological advances as aids rather than like replacements, that's where we see like the real
Hmm.
value and innovation. So while like I myself am not someone who's going to go in and do 3D modeling or draw up a whole building in Revit or something, I can appreciate being able to show my client, this is what your pump station's going to look like. Like this is the rendering
Yeah.
that my engineers did. And it's cooler than, a sketch on a 2D piece of paper sometimes, and it gets
Right.
them
Yeah.
kind of to have more buy-in. And then just to like the GIS or like GPS point, I think that provides us a level of accuracy in our designing that is, unprecedented, right? Like there's survey work and there are GIS maps for, clients, but when you're able to get different like systems that are talking to each other, and you can see the live monitoring of if a manhole is surcharging, or if a tank
Mhm.
level is dropping, like that just makes us better engineers because we have better information. So yeah, I think there's a lot of bright things ahead, and if we use them as tools and not as like the be all end all, I think our whole industry is going to really benefit.
So do you think there's any additional skill sets that engineers need to make sure that they're adapting to these things as more data driven results are developed and new digital tools are coming out? Any special skills that are needed?
I know there's some digital literacy that just needs to happen. I myself, I'm a millennial. I'm in the mix. I'm on TikTok. Like I'm trying to be, as hip as I can be to what's happening in the world. But I know that even then, I'm missing
Yeah.
stuff too. And so I think
Right.
you have to like seek out the new tools. Like I need to take a
Mm.
class probably on, what can our new GIS modeling do? Like we've had at GFT a big push on like AI innovation, and how can we use it to not replace what we're doing, but how can we use it to like enhance our processes? And if you could completely check out and never tap into those things. So I think, yeah, that digital literacy of like, and the desire to want to learn more, you need both in order
Yeah.
to stay with the times, I'd say.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the only other one I'd throw in there is adaptability. Realistically, like you have to be able to adapt to these things. I think you kind of touched on it specifically about learning these things, being up on the times. Figure out what's out there. There might be something that's new. Take the chance on those things, and you never know what's going to happen. It seems like in the digital world right now, things are changing rapidly, and if you're still using, and this is going to be an exaggeration, if you're still using pencil and paper to draw something, you're probably going to be left behind in that technical approach.
Although I think there's a time
Hopefully, that
and
was the right way.
place for, I think there's a time and place for
There
pen and
is.
paper.
There is, but like you said, right? Going to a client with your hand drafted, thing versus giving them the digital of like, here's what it's going to look like. There is a difference between the two things. And so, you know, like you said, being up with it, being on TikTok's fun.
Can't say that's
that's
contributed
something where,
professionally at all.
yeah, you never know. You never know. So where do you see the water engineering world going in the future? Anything that you're like, hey, keep an eye out for this, or anything related to it that might be coming up?
I'm not a fortune teller, and I think a lot of the work that we do is the groundwork is laid by regulations,
Mhm.
and, the government is in flux oftentimes, and those regulations change. So, I'm just grateful that we have an industry that can adapt, and that we can go after, maybe PFAS and wastewater is something that's going to be something we're going to talk about, or maybe we're going to get better at removing microplastics, or, I just think if you look close enough, there's always going to be a new problem for us to solve.
Right,
And
right.
instead of being like kind of a Debbie Downer about that, I think it's exciting to be able to start being in groups that think about the emerging contaminants, and be on projects starting to address them.
So, what's one final piece of advice you'd share with civil engineers and project leaders navigating their own career paths in water engineering?
I think the biggest advice that I have is that you need to just take chances and say yes to things, even if you're not sure what the outcome will be. And that's just life
Yeah.
advice in general, but it's served me well as an engineer. You say yes to the opportunities because you never know who you're going to meet and how that person will be a part of, your network later. And don't do it in a self-serving way either. Do it in a very, you know, genuine and like compassionate way. And as your network grows, so will your opportunities.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. To wrap things up, we're now going to transition into our civil engineering hot seat segment where I'll ask Rebecca a rapid round of questions that will give a glimpse into the daily habits, influences, and insights that has helped shape her career. Let's jump into it.
Strong project outcomes need skilled managers and competent leaders. EMI's corporate training delivers expert-led courses in project management and people leadership, plus industry-recognized certification and exclusive premium content to take your team even further. Elevate your team's leadership capabilities today. Visit engineeringmanagementinstitute.org and click on corporate training.
Now it's time for our CE hot seat segment of the week with Rebecca Martinez. All right, Rebecca, you're officially in the civil engineering hot seat. Are you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right. Do you have any specific rituals that you practice every day? For example, do you have a specific morning ritual or a lunchtime ritual, things that you do daily that contribute to you being a successful professional?
I always end my day by planning for the next day. So I do my timesheet like any good consultant, but I make a plan for what I want to accomplish the next day, and that really helps guide what my week looks like.
What is one book that you recommend to engineers regularly, or just one book that you found to be extremely helpful in your professional or your personal development?
So this isn't like engineering specific, but I recently read The Power Pause by Neha Rush, and it's kind of about women and their journey with parenting and careers and kind of all the nuances of that. And I recently had a little boy and had to kind of practice that pause myself. And I just think that even being aware that it's not just, taking time off from work to raise a family, I think that's just a big for everyone to notice, whatever like industry you're in.
And congratulations on that. I mean, that's a
Thanks.
fun time, and hopefully that book helped out. Thinking back on your managers of the past, picture your favorite manager or managers. What was it that made them your favorite?
Oh, that's such an easy question. My first manager when when I transferred into the water industry was just he was so warm and he was so genuine and he taught me everything I know, I'd say. And I think just the combination of him being approachable and knowledgeable was just chef's kiss. It was so good. Because I don't think you find that often.
Great. I've got one final question, and that is the critical civil engineering career elevator advice question. It's a mouthful, but if you got into an elevator with a civil engineering student and had about 30 to 40 seconds with them, what career advice would you share with them?
All right. So I'm in an elevator and I'm trying to convince someone to be an engineer, civil engineer. I would say that we are on the forefront of keeping our countries safer and keeping our people like fed and drinking correct, clean water, keeping sanitation accessible. It doesn't matter what country you're in, that's applicable. And so I think my pitch would be a civil engineer because you can do it anywhere. You can do it in New Jersey, you can do it in Spain. You're always going to be helping someone. And I think the best work that we do is when we can easily see who we're helping with our projects.
Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me today. Where can our listeners connect with you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Rebecca Martinez.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing more growth in your career.
Thank you.
Please remember you can find the show notes for this episode at civilengineeringpodcast.com. There you'll find the summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during the episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your civil engineering endeavors.